I'll admit that it's been a while since I've read Evola, and that I haven't read everything he's written. I've at least read Revolt Against the Modern World. I'm not even sure that I read Ride the Tiger. I think I was having trouble getting a copy of it. I think that I read a manual for right-wing youth and all that. And I still regularly read about Evola, but I'm not particularly interested in reading him anymore, or any other traditionalist, whether it be Rene Guénon or anybody else like that. And I suppose a TLDR on why, a very simple summary is that, reading somebody talk about the ancient world and traditional culture, for me, generally feels like a poor use of time when I could just be actually going and reading the ancient authors themselves. I like to study Hebrew. I was raised pagan. I'm still a pagan. I have no interest in becoming Jewish or Christian or Muslim. But nevertheless, I will read Hebrew, because when I can go back and read Hebrew text, even if it's somebody totally disconnected from me, it very much is still ancient culture as written from the person themselves. It's one of the very few avenues to direct access. I guess it's just on the top of history, just the importance of history and just looking at other people's interpretations. I don't want to listen to somebody else tell me about ancient culture, because I know it's so often wrong, and I know that it's so often mixed in with other things. I would love to read about Celtic paganism. I would love to, but I just think that the fact of the remaining resources is it's just not there. We just don't have Celtic records like we do Latin or Greek or Chinese or Indian. Whatever Norse and Celtic mythology we have left was written, centuries after the people in question converted to Christianity, and I just don't think that we can reliably distinguish what is the Christian and what is the pagan. It's more important to me that I get the real, authentic, I know what's going in my paganism than it's getting, a paganism that I'm connected to. And in addition to that, I guess it's just important for me to have variety, so that I don't really like perennialism. I don't like the view that there's, one truth that they all go back to. I think that, again, the reality of the ancient world and the ancient texts is it's full of strife, contention, and difference of belief. There is no one traditional way that you can go back to, as much as you might like, and I think that surrounding myself with all these different viewpoints is just a way of forcing me to think for myself and just, consider things. I can't just take the path that's been laid out for me, because there's just so many paths in front of me. I've talked with some Norse pagans who say, well, we don't really need the written records because Odin or whoever else is going to guide us, but I think that we can rely on Odin to guide us to a correct understanding of Norse paganism, about as well as we could have relied on Odin to prevent Norway and other Nordic countries from becoming Christian in the first place and losing the Norse pagan tradition. Now, when I tell people that I prefer Latin and, Roman culture, Roman history to Norse history, again, people seem to think, I'll take Celtic history, because this is a conversation I had with somebody recently, they feel like I'm saying that Italian culture is better than, Nordic culture, German culture, whatever else, and I can say I'm really not sure. Perhaps, the Vikings had a bunch of really great ideas, but I just think that the fact of the matter is that the existing resources for knowing what they authentically thought, is just infinitely better for Rome and Greece and India and China. I would say it's nothing personal that I have against Germany, against, Scandinavia, Iceland, whatever other country happens to be the case, England, the UK broadly. I don't have anything against those countries, just the state of the evidence. I know some amount of Welsh. I love the Welsh language. I love Welsh literature, but it's just not well attested enough. It just doesn't go back far enough, and it's honestly not something that I find as interesting. I don't feel like I could devote my life to a small section of Welsh poems, because any sort of going into that would be delving into a kind of speculation that I don't like. There's enough Roman Greek material that I can go through just reading the authors themselves in their own language. But I do dislike, I've said before, I dislike German philosophy. I don't really much care for German literature. I don't like Goethe, and both as an author and a person, and I feel like it's just German culture is suffused with Hegel, and I absolutely detest Hegel. And really, it's been spreading to, I think, the other European cultures too, is there's an extent where you really need to be familiar with Hegel to engage in anything else, and I just don't want to do that. I don't like Hegel, I don't like science. The only German author that I still kind of enjoy at this point is Arthur Schopenhauer. And Arthur Schopenhauer is mostly well known for what he says about women, but what he says about women is nice and kind and feminist in comparison to what he sometimes says about the Germans. I've made a video defending, Schopenhauer from being misogynist, and mostly the defense consists in saying that really Schopenhauer, he just kind of hates everybody. But especially the Germans. And Germany is my country of birth, and I've even expressed some desire to potentially go back to Germany someday. My mother won't allow it, though, because she simply does not like the current state of Germany. But if we had better records of Celtic and Nordic beliefs, great. I would love to know about them. If we had somebody that we could reliably go to tell us about these things, great. I would love to learn about them. But as it stands, I just don't think it's a practical reality.